Welcome back everyone. This is part 4 of Solution Architect Associate Examination probable questions that you will see in the examination. I'll be linking the document in the description below, as well as I'll add the link for the Facebook group where you can ask question if you have any doubts, and someone over there will be there to answer your question as well. So let's go ahead and get it started. So currently you are helping design and architect a highly available application. After building the initial environment, you discover that part of your application doesn't work correctly. Even port 443 is added to the security group. After adding port 443 to appropriate security group, how much time will it take before the changes are applied and the application begins working correctly? So for this, changes apply instantly, right? So changes apply instantly to the security group, and the application should be able to respond to 443 request. So you need not to wait any time to make the changes. Changes will apply instantly in security group, right? Some systems for setting up firewalls let you filter on source ports. Security groups let you filter only on destination port. When you add or remove rules, they are automatically applied to all instances associated with the security group. So let's move on to the next question. A customer has a single 3 terabyte volume on premise that is used to hold a large repository of images and print layout files. The repository is growing at 500 GB a year and must be presented as a single logical volume. The customer is becoming increasingly constrained with their local storage capacity and wants an offsite backup of this data while maintaining low latency access to their frequently accessed data. Which AWS storage gateway configuration meets this customer requirement? So it asks for the following scenario: the best suitable AWS storage gateway configuration. So that is gateway cached volumes with snapshot scheduled to Amazon S3, right? So here you need to hold a large repository of images and print layout files, and as you can see, this is growing at a rapid scale, right? And the customer is becoming increasingly constrained with their storage and wants upside backup of the data. So for this, right, they need to have gateway cached volumes with snapshot scheduled to S3. Gateway cached volumes let you use Amazon S3 as the primary data store while retaining frequently accessed data locally in your storage gateway. So moving on to next question. A company is planning to use the AWS ECS service to work with containers. There is need for the least amount of administrative overhead while launching containers. How can this be achieved? So for launching the ECS, right? For launching the ECS, when you are trying to work with containers with least amount of administrative overhead, right, you need to use the forget launch type in ECS. So what is this forget launch type? Forget launch type allows you to run your containerized application without the need to provision and manage the backend infrastructure. So this is the thing. So if you don't want to manage and provision the backend infrastructure, you will use the forget launch type in AWS ECS. Just register your task definition and forget launches is the container for you, right? So this is the scenario where you do not want to provision and manage the backend infrastructure. So for this question you need to watch this. It says least amount of administrative overhead, which means you need not to provision and manage the backend infrastructure, right? So moving on to next question. You are responsible for deploying a critical application to AWS. It is required to ensure that the control set for this application meet PCI compliance. Also, there is need to monitor web application logs to identify any malicious activity. Which of the following services are used to fulfill this requirement? So for this, we'll use CloudWatch logs as well as the CloudTrail for API activities, right? So moving to next question. One plans on using SQS queues and AWS Lambda to leverage the serverless aspects of AWS Cloud. Each invocation to AWS Lambda will send message to SQS queue. In order for message to be sent, which of the following must be in place? So to send the message in SQS queue with the use of Lambda, there should be an IAM role with required permissions, right? There should be an IAM role with required permissions. So while working with AWS Lambda functions, if there is a need to access another resources, right, always ensure that an IAM role is in place. So moving to next question. You have enabled CloudTrail logs for your company's AWS account. In addition, the IT security department has mentioned that the logs need to be encrypted. How can you achieve this? So you can see the IT security department wants CloudTrail logs to be encrypted. So how can you do that? So there is nothing to do at all, because there is no need to do anything since the logs are already encrypted. By default, CloudTrail log files are encrypted using Amazon S3 SSE. You can also choose to encrypt your log files with AWS KMS. Moving to next question. A company has set up their data layer in S3. There are a number of requests which include read and write and updates to objects in S3 bucket. Users sometimes complain that updates to an object are not being reflected. The reason is, see, when you make the updates and deletes, it will not be reflected at once because there is a thing called eventual consistency model. So if you have hosted some website in S3 and if you want to make certain changes in your code, you want to make certain font changes or certain theme changes, it will not be seen on your browser as soon as you make the changes, because there is a thing so called eventual consistency. So updates are being made to the same key for the objects, right? So this is the reason, because updates are being made to the same key for the objects. That's why there is a delay, right? So moving to next question. You plan on hosting a web application consisting of a web server and database server. These servers are going to be hosted on different EC2 instances in different subnets in VPC. Which of the following can be used to ensure that the database server only allows traffic from the web server? So to ensure that the database server only allows the traffic from the web server, right? Such thing you can do with the use of security group, which helps to control the traffic of the EC2 instances, right? So moving to next question, a company has a Redshift cluster defined in AWS. The IT operations team have ensured that both automated and manual snapshots are in place. Since the cluster is going to be run for a long duration of couple of years, reserved instances have been purchased. There has been a recent concern on the cost being incurred by the cluster. Which of the following steps can be carried out to minimize the cost being incurred by the cluster? So to minimize the cost, right, you need to delete the manual snapshots. So why? Regardless of whether you enable automated snapshots, you take a manual snapshot whenever you want. Amazon Redshift will never automatically delete a manual snapshot. Manual snapshots are retained even after you delete your cluster. So this kind of snapshot will be highly available, because even if you delete the cluster, the snapshot is still remains in case of manual snapshot, and as well as you can reduce the cost, right? So moving to next question, you currently have a set of Lambda functions which have business logic embedded in them. You want customers to have the ability to call these functions via HTTPS. How can you achieve this? So for this, you need to use the API gateway and provide integration with the AWS Lambda function, right? So again, let's go to the question. It says you currently have a set of Lambda function which have business logic embedded in it. You want customers have the ability to call this function via HTTPS. So this as you want your customers to have the ability for this function through HTTPS, you can set up this with the help of API gateway, right? So use API gateway and provide integration with the Lambda function. So the next question, a company wants to deploy Docker containers to AWS cloud. They want a highly scalable service which can help manage the orchestration of these containers. Which of the following will be the ideal for such a requirement? So for highly scalable orchestration for the Docker containers, we have a service called ECS for Kubernetes, right? So that is called EKS. So Amazon EKS is managed service that makes it easy to run Kubernetes on AWS without needing to install and operate your own Kubernetes cluster. So you need not to install and operate your own Kubernetes cluster. So you can deal with this requirement by using the EKS, right? So moving towards next question, you create an auto-scaling group which is used to spin up instances on demand. As an architecture, you need to ensure that the instances are pre-installed with a software when they are launched. What are the ways in which you can achieve this? So when you are creating an auto-scaling group which is used to spin up the instances on demand, and you also want to ensure the instances are pre-installed with the software, when it is launched. Then for this you need to add the script, right? You need to add the script for the installation in the user data section, right? As well as you need to create a golden image and then create a launch configuration. So the user data section of an instance launch can be used to pre-configure software after the instance is initially booted. You can create AMI or golden image with the already installed software, then create a launch configuration which can be used by auto scaling group. So moving to next question, you need to ensure that data stored in S3 is encrypted but do not want to manage the encryption key. Which of the following encryption mechanism should you use in this case? So if you do not want to manage the encryption key, you should use server-side encryption for S3, right? So this helps you not managing your encryption keys. So moving to next question, you have a requirement for deploying an existing Java-based application on AWS. There is a need for automatic scaling for the underlying environment. Which of the following can be used to deploy this environment in the quickest way possible, right? For automating the scaling of the underlying environment and deploying it in the quickest way, we have the service called Elastic Beanstalk. So we should use Elastic Beanstalk service to provision this environment. So AWS Elastic Beanstalk is an easy to use service for deploying and scaling web applications and services deployed with Java, .NET, PHP, Node.js, Python, Ruby, Go and Docker on familiar servers such as Apache, Nginx and Passenger as well as IIS, right? So moving to next question, you have been tasked with architecting an application in AWS. The architecture will consist of EC2, load balancer, auto scaling and Route 53. There is a directive to ensure that the blue-green deployment are possible in this architecture. Which routing policy should you ideally use in Route 53 for achieving blue-green deployment? So for this kind of deployment of the architecture, you need to use the weighted routing policy. So weighted routing lets you associate multiple resources with a single domain or subdomain and choose how many traffic is routed to the instance to the resource. This can be used for a variety of purposes, including load balancing and testing new version of software. Okay, let's move to next question. It says you need to have a data storage layer in AWS. Following are the key requirements. That is storage of JSON document, availability of indexes, and automatic scaling. Which of the following would be the ideal storage layer for the above requirement? So that is DynamoDB. So let's move to the next question. It says your company is planning on hosting their development, test, and production application on EC2 instances in AWS. They are worried about how access control would be given to relevant IT administrator for each of the above environment. As an architecture, what would you suggest for managing the relevant access? So for this scenario, you need to add tags to the instance marketing each environment and then segregate access using IAM policies, right? So what is the condition here is you need to add tags to the instances, marketing its environment, and then segregate access using IAM policies, right? As you have different environment, right? We have development, test, and production. So you need to have add tags to the instances for marketing the each environment, right? As well as you need to segregate the access with the use of IAM policies. You can quickly identify the resource based on tags. Tags consist of a key and an optional value. So let's move to next question. You are performing a load testing exercise on your application hosted on AWS. While testing your AWS RDS MySQL DB instance, you notice that your application becomes non-responsive when you reach 100% CPU utilization. Your application is read heavy. What method will help your data tier to meet the application need? So it says your application is not responding because of high CPU utilization and heavy read application, right? So for this, you need to add Amazon RDS DB read replica and have your application direct read queries to them. And you need to use Elastic Hash in front of database, that is RDS. And you need to sort your data set among multiple RDS DB instances, right? So moving to next question. You work for a large company having multiple applications which are very different from each other. These are built using different programming languages. How can you deploy this application as quick as possible? So the scenario says if you have multiple applications, right, which are very different from each other, there is no similarities between them, and these are needed to build using different languages, right? So how can you do that? So you can do that with the help of Docker container and you can use the deployment with the help of Elastic Beanstalk, right? So with Docker containers, you can define your own runtime environment, choose your own platform and programming language. That's the most benefit where you'll use Docker. See, you'll use Docker containers when you need to choose your own platform, programming language, or runtime environment, right? So for this scenario, you use Docker containers, and you can deploy it with the help of Elastic Beanstalk. Okay. So moving on to next question. You are designing a system which needs at minimum 8 M4 large instance operating to service traffic. While designing a system for high availability in the US East 1 region having 6 availability zone, your company needs to be able to handle the depth of the full availability zone. How should you distribute the servers to save as much cost as possible, assuming all EC2 nodes are properly linked to Elastic Load Balancer? Your VPC account can utilize US East 1 availability zone, A through F inclusive. So for this, you need to have 2 servers in each availability zone, A through E inclusive. Why? With this solution, you can have minimum of 8 servers even if one availability zone goes down. So out of if you, with the 2 server in each availability zone, right, from A to E, you'll have total 10, right? So even you have one availability code. Even if one availability goes down, right, availability zone goes down, you will have minimum of 8 servers, right? So moving to next question, we have an application currently consists of an EC2 instance hosting a web application. The web application connects to an AWS RDS. Which of the following can be used to ensure the database layer is highly available? For this, you need to enable the multi-AZ for RDS database to make it highly available. Moving on to next question. An application currently accepts users to upload files to an ES3 bucket. You want to ensure that file name for each uploaded file is stored in DynamoDB table. How can this be achieved? So you need to create a lambda function to insert the required entry for each uploaded file, and you need to add an event with notification sent to lambda, right? What you need to do for uploading the files in ES3, and when you are storing the file in DynamoDB table, for that you need to create a AWS lambda function to insert the required entry for each uploaded file, and you need to add an event with notification sent to lambda. So moving to next question, we have an application which allows users to upload images to the S3 bucket. Initially, these images will be downloaded quite frequently, but after some time the images might not be accessed once a week, and the retrieval time should be as minimum as possible. What could be done to ensure the cost-effective solution? For this, you need to store the object in S3 standard storage, and you need to create a lifecycle policy to transfer the object to S3 infrequent access storage after a certain duration of time. So let me go to the question again. It says application allows users to upload images to S3 bucket, right? Initially, these images will be downloaded quite frequently, but after a certain time, images will not be accessed once a week, right? So for this, you need to create a lifecycle policy, right? And for the objects that you need to access once a week, you need to use infrequent access. So you need to store the objects in S3 storage and create a lifecycle policy to transfer the S3 infrequent storage, transfer the object to S3 infrequent access storage after a certain duration of time. So moving to next question, a company hosts a popular web application that connects to an Amazon RDS MySQL DB instance running in the private VPC subnet created with default ACL settings. The IT security department has identified a DDoS attack from a suspected IP. How would you protect the subnet from this attack? So to protect from the DDoS attack, right, if you have if you have identified the DDoS attack from the suspected IP, you need to change the inbound NACL to deny access from the suspected IP. So you need to have the deny rule, right, for the inbound NACL from the suspected IP. So moving to next question, we have videos that are uploaded to an S3 bucket, and you need to provide access to users to view the same. What is the best way to do so while maintaining a good user experience for all users regardless of the region in which they are located? So for maintaining a good experience regardless of whatever region the users are located, there is a service called CloudFront which helps to make it highly available, right? So you should use CloudFront with S3 bucket as a source. So moving to next question, we have an organization which has a requirement to store 10 terabyte worth of scanned files. They are required to have a search application in place to search through the scanned files. Which of the below mentioned options is ideal for implementing the search facility? So as the requirement, you have to store 10 terabyte, you have to store 10 terabyte worth of scanned files, and they are required to have search application in place of search through the scanned files, right? So for this you can use the standard redundancy to store and sort the scanned files, and you can use cloud source for query processing, right? And use elastic beanstalk to host the website across multiple availability zone. So we will be using standard redundancy store for S3, right, for the store of these scan file, and we'll be using cloud source for querying those processes, for query processing, and we'll use elastic beanstalk to host the website across multiple availability zone, right? So moving to next question, we have a concern raising in your company. Suppose a concern is raising in your company that developers could potentially delete production-based EC2 resources. As a cloud administrator, which of the below option would you choose to alleviate the concern? So you do not want the production-based EC2 instances to be deleted, right? So what you want to do as a cloud administrator is you need to tag the production instance with the production identifying tag and add resource level permissions, right? This is the main thing that you need to do. You need to first tag the production instance, and you need to add resource level permissions to the developers with an explicit deny on the terminal API to call instance from the production tag. So in that way, developers, right, they cannot delete the production application. So you need to add resource level permission for developer to explicitly deny on the terminal API. And you need to create a separate AWS account, and you need to add developers to that account. So this is also the solution, right? You can create a separate AWS account and add developers to that account. So moving to next question. You are an architect for gaming application which is in design phase. Which of the following services can be used to ensure optimal performance and least latency for gaming users? For that, you need to use AWS Elasticache. AWS Elasticache offers fully managed Redis and Memcached, seamlessly deploy, operate, and scale popular open source compatible in-memory data store. Popular choice for gaming, IoT apps, ad tech, financial service, and healthcare. So, as you know, we have the requirement for least latency for gaming users, right? So you have noticed that to increase the performance for this, when you are getting high load on the RDS, you used to use Elasticache. Now there is another scenario that for it is suitable for gaming application as well, right? When you want the optimal performance and least latency for gaming users, right? As well as we can see that it is also popular not only for gaming but also for IoT apps, ad tech, financial service, and healthcare. So moving to next question. An application planning to use AWS for their production rollout wants to implement automation for deployment such that it will automatically create a LAMP stack, download the latest PHP installable from S3 and set up the Elastic Load Balancer. Which of the below mentioned AWS service meets the requirement for making an orderly deployment of the software? So that can be done with the help of Elastic Beanstalk. So we can simply upload the code and Elastic Beanstalk automatically handles the deployment from capacity provisioning, load balancing, auto scaling to application health monitoring, right? So for everything, right, to do the various things like since deployment, capacity provisioning, load balancing, auto scaling and monitoring the health. So this is the service Elastic Beanstalk, right, which helps for the orderly deployment of the software. So moving to next question, we have your company log analysis application takes more than 4 hours to generate a report of all top 10 users of your web application. You have been asked to implement a system that can report this information in real time, ensure that report is always up to date and handle increases in the number of requests to your web application. Choose the option that is cost effective and can fulfill the requirement, right? For this, you need to post your log data to Amazon Kinesis stream and subscribe your log processing application so that it is configured to process your logging data. So first thing you know that for this real-time data you need to have Kinesis data streams, right? And the next thing that you need to do is you need to subscribe your log processing application so that it is configured to process your logging data, right? So moving to next question, there is a requirement to load a lot of data from your on-premise network to AWS Redshift. Which of the below options can be used for this data transfer? So if you want to transfer a lot of data from on-premise to Redshift, right, we have this option called direct connect. So this doesn't provide the encrypted connection. For encrypted connection you will use the VPN, and here if the load is a lot, it says there is a lot of load in data, right? So that can be done with the help of direct connects as well as Amazon Snowball. Okay, moving to next question. As the cloud administrator of your company, you notice that one of EC2 instances is restarting frequently. There is a need to troubleshoot and analyze the system logs. What can be used in AWS to store and analyze the log files from the EC2 instance? So always notice that to analyze the log files, right, and to know the reason for why is it happening so, right, we need to look the AWS CloudWatch logs. So moving to next question, your company has migrated their production application into AWS VPC 6 months ago. As a cloud architect, you are required to revise the infrastructure and ensure that it is cost effective in long term. There are more than 50 EC2 instances that are up and running all the time to support the business operation. What can you do to lower the cost? So for lowering the cost, you need to use the reserved instances, because it says you are migrating the production environment, right, into VPC 6 months ago, right, and you are required to revise the infrastructure and ensure it to be cost effective for the long term, right? Whenever you want the long term, right, then this is the best scenario, reserved instance, right? So when you have instances that will be continuously and sorry, this is for the instance that will be used continuously and throughout the year, right? Now moving to next question. You have configured an auto scaling group for which the minimum running instances is 2 and the maximum running instance is 10. For past 30 minutes, all 5 instances have been running at 100 CPU utilization. However, the auto scaling group has not added any more instances to the group. What is the most likely cause for this? So you already have 20 on-demand instances. The auto scaling group's scale up policy has not yet been reached. That's the reason. You can see that you are running 2 instances at minimum and you are running 10 at maximum, and for 30 minutes only 5 instances have been running at 100 CPU utilization, right? However, auto scaling groups has not added any more instance to the group, so that is sure that you need to make changes in auto scaling scale up policy, right? So the reason is you already have 20 on demand instances, right? And the auto scaling group's scale up policy has not yet been reached. By default, you can run up to 20 on demand EC2 instances, right? This is in default. So I have mentioned you have already 20 on demand instances, because by default you have 20 on demand EC2 instances, right? So if you need more, you need to have a requisition form which you need to complete and you need to submit to AWS. So moving to next question. A company has an application hosted in AWS. This application consists of EC2 instances that sit behind elastic load balancer with EC2 instances. The following are the requirement from an administrative perspective. So it must be able to collect and analyze logs with regards to elastic load balancer's performance, and it must ensure that notifications are sent when the latency goes behind 10 seconds. Which of the following can be used to achieve the requirement? So you can see that you have to analyze the logs in here, right? So for this you can think of CloudWatch, which helps for monitoring. And we know that with regard to the elastic load balancer performance, we have enabled the logs on the elastic load balancer, and then we need to investigate the logs whenever there is an issue, right? So if you want to analyze the logs with regard to elastic load balancer performance, then you need to enable the logs on the elastic load balancer, right? And then investigate the logs whenever there is the issue. So moving towards next question. Your company would like to leverage the AWS storage option and integrate it with the current on-premise infrastructure. Besides, due to business requirement, low latency access to all data is a must. Which of the following option would be best suited for this scenario? It says that you want to integrate your on-premise infrastructure, right? And you want the low latency access for all data, right? So for that you need to configure the storage gateway stored volumes, right? If you need low latency access to your database, first configure your on-premise gateway to store all data locally, then asynchronously back up point-in-time snapshot of the data in Amazon S3. The configuration provides durable and inexpensive offsite backup that you can recover to your local data center on EC2, right? So if you want the on-premise infrastructure, right, for leveraging to the AWS storage option, you need to configure the storage gateway stored volumes, right? And it also helps in low latency access to the data. So moving to next question. You have an IT company which would like to secure their resources in AWS account. Which of the following options is able to secure data at rest and in transit in AWS? For this, you need to encrypt all EVS volume attached to EC2 instance. You need to use server-side encryption for S3. And you need to use SSL or HTTPS when using Elastic Load Balancer. So for securing the resources in AWS account, we have the encryption for EVS volumes, right, whichever is attached to EC2 instance, and we'll use SSE for S3, and we'll use server-side language SSL or HTTPS when using the Elastic Load Balancer, right? So this is the most secure way. So moving to next question. Your company is hosting an application in AWS. The application is read intensive and consists of a set of web servers and AWS RDS. It has been noticed that the response time of the application decreases due to the load of AWS RDS instance. Which of the following measure can be taken to scale the data higher? So for that, you need to create a Amazon DB read replica and configure the application layer to query the read replica for query needs. Also, you need to use elastic cache in front of your Amazon RDS DB to cache common queries, right? So we know that RDS read replica provides enhanced performance and durability for the database instances. This replication feature makes it easy to elastically scale out beyond the capacity constraint of the single DB instance for read-heavy database workloads. So moving to next question. Your team has developed an application and now needs to deploy that application onto an EC2 instances. This application interacts with DynamoDB table. Which of the following is correct and most secure way to ensure that application interacts with DynamoDB table? So most secure way to know that the application interacts with DynamoDB table is to create a role which has the necessary and can be assumed by the EC2 instances. So what does IAM role do is IAM role are designed in such a way that your application can securely make API requests from your instances without requiring you to manage security credentials that the application use, right? So moving to next question. Your company is big on building container-based application. Currently, they use Kubernetes for their on-premise Docker-based orchestration. They want to move to AWS and preferably not have to manage the infrastructure for the underlying orchestration service. Which of the following could be used for this purpose? So it says they want to use Kubernetes, but they do not want to manage the infrastructure, right? So you might be thinking of EKS, right? But why EKS is not the scenario in here is this question is asking that we need we need not to have manage the infrastructure for the underlying orchestrating service, right? So ECS with Kubernetes installed is not correct for this scenario because this would add maintenance overhead for the company, and according to question the company doesn't want to manage the infrastructure. So the suitable option is ECS. Amazon Elastic Container Service is highly scalable, high performance container orchestration service that supports Docker containers and allows you to easily run and scale containerized application on AWS. Moving to next question. You are creating a number of EBS volumes for the EC2 instances hosted in your company AWS account. The company has asked you to ensure that the EBS volume are available even in the event of disaster. How would you accomplish this? So you can accomplish this by creating a snapshot of EBS volume, and you need to ensure that snapshots are available in another region. Note, there might be scenario which comes like a snapshot are available in another availability zone. So this is not the scenario. You need to ensure that snapshots are available in another region, not within the same availability zone or another availability zone, right? So moving to next question. You have a requirement to host a web application. You need to ensure high availability for application, so you create an elastic load balancer and place the EC2 instance behind elastic load balancer. You need to ensure that users only access the application via the DNS name of the load balancer. How would you design the network part of the application? For that, you need to create two public subnet for elastic load balancer, and you need to create two private subnet for backend instances. And you must create public subnet in same availability zone as private subnet that are used by your private instances. Then associate this public subnet to internet facing load balancer, right? So this is the thing that you need to do. You need to create two public subnet for elastic load balancer, and you need to create two private subnet for backend instances, right? So let's move to next question. You work as an architect for a company. An application is going to be deployed on a set of EC2 instance in VPC. The instance will be hosting a web application. You need to design a security group to ensure that users have the ability to connect from the internet via HTTPS. So to enable users to connect the internet via HTTPS, you need to have the inbound access on port 443 for the internet, right? So because 443 is HTTPS, right? For this you need to have inbound access on port 443 for the internet. And security group are stateful. You don't need to define the rule for outbound traffic, right? So you need not to define any outbound traffic rule for security group because they are stateful. So moving to next question. It says this is not only the key, it's not the particular question, it's the thing that you need to consider, right? So you need to create a Bastion host, right, or Bastion host in a public subnet. Always you need to create a Bayesian host in public subnet and make IT administrator staff use this as jump server to backend instance to ensure secure administrator of IT administrators for instances in the VPC, right? So that you can access the private subnet, right? The Bayesian users will be able to you access the private subnet with this architecture. Okay, we'll be continuing this another section in another lesson. So if you have any doubt, you can post the questions in the Facebook group, which I'll link in the description below. So thank you.